Hey everybody, and welcome to your first official training as a World Racer Passport Treasurer. We are so excited to have you coming alongside us in this way to serve your team, your squad, adventures, and honestly, even the people back home that have supported you and given their money to help make this trip happen. As a treasurer, it will be your responsibility to keep up with your team's financial transactions each month. Also, to help make sure that you stay on budget and even just to be good stewards of the money that God has given you at this time in this season for this trip. However, don't freak out because you're not alone out there. We as Adventure staff want to make sure that you have all the training and tools that you need to make this all happen. So, now we're going to start with the first tool that we've created for you to help you keep track of transactions, to help you stay on budget, and to keep up with your cash management. It's called the Budget Tool Spreadsheet. Let's look at it together. The Budget Tool has four main sections: country information, the budget box, the ledger, and down at the bottom, cash management. Let's start at the top with country information. First, you will notice that your squad's trip code is in the top left corner. Each squad is assigned a code to assist accounting in differentiating between trips. Your trip code will also be written on all of your receipts, so it's important to remember from the beginning. Moving to the right and starting at the top, you can see where there is a cell for the number of team members this country. Always double check to make sure that the correct number of people on your team is listed in this cell, as it affects your budget. Below that is the route order. This indicates which number this country is on your world race route. Next are cells to indicate which date you entered and the date that you plan on leaving the country. It's okay if these aren't exact, but you should put in the beginning your estimated time of arrival and departure. The next cell is very important. Sometimes you will have cash left over from your previous country. When this is the case, upon entering the new country, you should exchange any leftover team money and enter the new amount into the new local currency into the F7 cell. This is very important to remember because otherwise your cash on hand will be inaccurate. We will talk more about this later. The country and currency cell is also an important way of documenting which country you are in and the currency that is being used for your spreadsheet. Your spreadsheet will only work in one currency. Some countries may use multiple currencies. However, you should only choose one for the use of your spreadsheet. For example, in Cambodia, both USD and Riel are used. If most of the transactions are being done in Riel, then Riel should go in this cell. And anytime USD is used for an expense, the transaction amount should be converted into Riel before it is entered onto the spreadsheet. The last cell in the month information section is the exchange rate. When you receive your spreadsheet for the month, this exchange rate should already be filled in. Because exchange rates vary both daily and by location, we use an average rate for the past 30 days and stick with this rate for the entire time in the country. You will not need to edit this cell unless told otherwise. If you scroll to the right, you will see the next section of your spreadsheet, the budget boxes. This area shows you the amount of money your team is budgeted for the entire time in the country. After checking through that all of the country information is correct, the first thing that you should look at on your spreadsheet for the month is your budget. You'll notice that the entire budget box is shaded in gray. Anything that is shaded in gray should never be edited because there are formulas that populate each cell. So this section is for you to look at as a reference, however, it should never be altered. The first box shows the different expense categories for which you have potentially been given a budget for the month. As a team treasurer, you will only be given a budget for field expenses. As a squad leader or logistics leader, you may also see logistics or debrief expenses built into the budget on your spreadsheet. The second and third boxes show how much money has been budgeted for each expense type. The second box shows you your budget in local currency. The third box automatically converts and provides you with the same budget in USD. Each of these boxes has three columns: budget, actual, and over/under. The first column, budget, shows how much you have been budgeted for the month in each category and type. At the bottom, you can see what your total budget is. It is important that when you plan for the month, you do not go over this amount. The second column shows you what you have actually spent so far in this country. In the beginning, it will be blank. However, as you enter each financial transaction into the ledger, this column will automatically update with the amounts you've actually spent in each category. The last column is over/under. Once you begin to spend in each category, this column will also automatically update. In each row, it will show you how much you are either over budget or under budget in that expense category. If you are under budget, the number will show up in parentheses. If you are over budget, it will be a number without parentheses. The total at the bottom will show you how much you are either over or under for your team's budget that month. It is important that you try to stay under or at budget for each expense category each month. Your team's spreadsheet will be tailored to each specific month and location, so that your given budget should be adequate to cover what you will need for life and ministry that month. However, if you have to go over in a category, we understand. We want you to be accurate in letting us know where you have spent your money, so that we can make adjustments if needed in the future. Our biggest goal is that you stay under or at budget for your overall budget total at the bottom. Finally, the cash over and cash short lines come from the cash management section. We'll discuss this more in a moment, but what you need to know is that the budget section can be really helpful for this to see how much you were either over or short in USD on your cash on hand. Now let's discuss the ledger. Scrolling back to the left, you'll see where you will be recording every financial transaction that is made while you are in each country. Each line of the ledger typically corresponds to a receipt in your hand. The ledger is built from your receipts. So looking at a line, the first thing to be entered is the date that the actual transaction took place. Next, there is a space for a description of the transaction. This should give an idea of what the money was used for, such as 14 days of lodging, supplies for vacation Bible school, transportation from the airport to our ministry site, or 60 minutes for team phone. That was a lot of examples, but the point is, we want you to be specific. Next, there's a drop down for the expense type. Most, if not all, of your expenses will be field expenses. The exception is for squad leaders and logistics, who will sometimes record debrief or logistics expenses. Next is the expense category, which is pretty straightforward. Here is another drop-down, which you can select what category the expense falls into. The most important part of the ledger is the 3 columns from which you can choose to enter in the amount of the transaction. When you withdraw money from an ATM, this amount goes in the ATM withdrawal column. The middle column, cash expense, is used every time cash is physically exchanged in a transaction. This will be the column used most often. And the last column, credit card expense, is used any time that you pay for something by swiping your credit card. No cash is involved in this transaction, so it should not affect how much cash you have on hand. Another common reason to use this column is if payments have been wired to your host for the month, or you see an ATM fee show up on your screen whenever you're making an ATM withdrawal. If your host is being wired payments for the month, then staff at Adventures or your logistics or squad leaders will communicate this to you. Then you'll receive further instructions about the specifics of how to record or wire on your spreadsheet. The final column of the ledger is for recording any other special transaction comments. It's the transaction comment column. This is the only column that is not mandatory to fill out. It is used to record special notes that may need to be remembered in reference to each line of your ledger. It's for your discretion and your use. For example, if you were in Cambodia and paid for something in USD, but recorded it in real, you may want to put the original USD amount in the transaction comment. Another common use of this column is to record receipt numbers, or to indicate how many receipts are included in a single line when receipts of the same expense category are summed together onto a spreadsheet to save lines. We'll talk more about this issue in troubleshoot training. Scrolling down, you'll find our last section of the budget tool spreadsheet. It's called our cash management section. These lines are to help you keep up with how much money you should have on hand at any given time. As you enter transactions into the ledger, the expenses will automatically total here at the bottom. You will be able to see how much you have spent in the month so far. Below this is your calculated cash on hand. Based on the transactions you have entered into your spreadsheet, this tells you how much physical cash you should have on hand for your team. At the end of each day, you should count how much cash you actually have for your team and enter it into the actual cash on hand cell. This is the only cell you should ever enter information into in this section of your spreadsheet. Once you've entered in how much cash you actually have, the spreadsheet will calculate and tell you either how much cash you are short or over. If an amount shows up in the short cell, then that is how much money you are missing. In other words, you don't have as much money as you should. If an amount shows up in over, then you have more money on hand than what you should based on your spreadsheet. Whether you are over or short, that amount will also show up in the budget box as we mentioned earlier. Again, this can be helpful if you're wondering how much you are over or short in USD. The important thing to remember is that we do not expect you to be 100% accurate in calculated cash on hand versus actual cash on hand. We want a realistic picture of finances on the field, and we know that when you are dealing with crazy currencies and daily transactions, some money might get lost in the mix. So always be honest. If your cash discrepancy is over $50, then Adventure staff will work with you to help solve the mystery of where the money might be, or where errors might exist on your spreadsheet. In addition, in the troubleshooting training, we will discuss common errors to check for when you are over or under significant amounts of money on your spreadsheet. So those are the basics of how to navigate and understand your budget tool spreadsheet. Above all, always remember that staff here at Adventures is always happy and available to help when your spreadsheet is having issues or if a tricky situation has you confused. All you have to do is ask.